Are not lectures. This is our idea of catalyzing innovation, thinking about telling stories, and bringing in people who represent the theme by bridging worlds of communities, practice, working with policymakers. And so this session is going to be a little bit different. It will feel different, and you will act different because you will be part of the session as well. First, I want to introduce our moderator, who is going to tell us about our lovely panel of ed talkers. Natalie Tran is from the University of California, Fullerton. Sorry. And her work focuses on examining innovative and effective practices to improve students' learning experiences in the classroom and out of school. Her work explores the integration of mindfulness in educational settings and issues related to diversity in higher education. She's currently the director of the National Resource Center for Asian Languages at Cal State Fullerton, aimed at improving the nation's capacity for the teaching and learning of less commonly taught languages by drawing on the expertise of scholars, educators, and community stakeholders. So even though Natalie is not an ed talker, she's also very well-versed in our theme of the in-between places. Okay. And Natalie, do you want to come up? Thank you so much. Oh, and we apologize for the delay. We're going to be finishing at 6:55. So if you need to run next door to the Jackson Scholars Reception, that's totally doable. You can still stay through the end. Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to the session, and thank you so much for being here. I know you are in the lovely San Diego, and you're here on a Saturday evening, but you are in for a real treat. So for the name of our Ed Talk, but actually we had a conversation with our presenters earlier this afternoon, and we decided to change that to Ed Dialogue instead. The name of our Ed Dialogue for this year is The In-Between Spaces, Living, Working, and Learning Across Borders. Specifically, we would like to highlight efforts to redefine, rework the borders, and we have asked our panelists to speak about how they move, shape, and remove borders that separate youth, communities, and educators. And so I would like to do a brief introduction of our panelists, but I don't want to steal their thunder because in a minute they're going to share about their background experiences. So you'll have a much better understanding of their bio. Beginning with Miguel Guajardo, and he is from Texas State University, San Marcos. Also Francisco from University of Texas. We also have Olympia, Kyriakidis, an award-winning principal in Lakeside Union School District. And last but not least, we have Lee Francis, who is the current National Director of Warcraft Circle. So each presenter will have the opportunity to share some of the work that they're doing. And again, this session is designed to be very interactive. Please join me in welcoming our panelists.
Okay, I'm up first, and I had a PowerPoint. Thank you. How's everyone doing tonight? Good. So I had the pleasure of being the principal of Riverview Elementary School for the past 8 years here in San Diego County in the Lakeside Union School District. San Diego County has 42 school districts. This year, though, I am no longer the principal. I have moved to the San Diego County Office of Education, where I continue to support all schools, including Riverview, in developing their programs. So about 8 years ago, our superintendent gave me a really great assignment. He asked me to reinvent a struggling public school, a very traditional public school that had declining enrollment and very mediocre to low test scores. The enrollment in the school had dropped down below 300 students, and at one time it had housed up to 700 students. So we began to reinvent the school. They had just started a Spanish immersion program, and when I came on board, we decided to add Chinese as a third language and create a trilingual program. So from there, we really thought about how we could continue to reinvent the school to create an opportunity for the students in the neighborhood as well as for opportunities for students outside the neighborhood and up our enrollment. So when I was given this assignment, I decided to go have a conversation with my brother-in-law, who's a director at Google, and I asked him, so at Google, when you look for your employees, what do you want them to know? What do you want them to understand, and what do you want them to be able to do? And we had a very long conversation about that, and it was a very surprising conversation. It wasn't all that I expected. Language came out very strong because he oversees groups all over the globe. And so he was very interested in candidates that were multilingual and also had multicultural proficiency. But he also looked, of course, at their technical abilities and their academics. But what really surprised me the most was that he said that he was looking for employees who had a very strong work ethic and were very humble as well, that they didn't come in with wanting the corner office right away, that they were willing to start at the bottom and work their way up. So I thought about, what might that look like in college? What might it look like in high school? What might it look like in middle school? And what would it look like in an elementary school? What would it look like for a 5-year-old? And I have long believed that we underestimate what a 5-year-old can do because they are amazing. And so we really started to shape our trilingual program for our students, and we brought together all the stakeholders and really created a strong unity of purpose. And this is our mission here. But really it came down to preparing tomorrow's global leaders today. And when we say leaders, we don't necessarily mean those necessarily leading the way, but we really focused on servant leadership to match what we had heard and to really build that capacity in our students. So, with English, Spanish, and Mandarin Chinese, our students would be able to communicate with almost 70% of the world's population. That's a really good start to having them not only survive, but thrive in a global society. So we really thought about our program and how we could make it as high quality as we could for our students learning 3 languages. And we were very careful and very strategic in what we created. So this was the original program. If you've ever been familiar with a dual immersion program, a 90-10 model is very common. But the 90-10 model, usually the 10% is English. In our case, the 10% was divided between Chinese and English. So that was where we decided to add the 3rd language. And after a couple of years, we had gotten a FLAP grant to get going with this project, but FLAP grant and funding, we were hitting hard times in education. And so we knew that we were going to get another FLAP grant, but then they stopped funding FLAP grants altogether. So we decided, how are we going to sustain our program? How will our program exist? We were a normal public school. We weren't a magnet. We weren't a charter. We didn't have any extra funding of any kind. So we decided to create a reciprocal model and create a Mandarin immersion program with Spanish as a 3rd language. And so we had 2 models that would help sustain and have a symbiotic relationship on our campus. And again, we were strategic. We thought, what would it look like, again, for students in college, in high school, in middle school, and elementary school? And we planned where we needed them to be in their language targets. This is language targets based on the ACTFL levels, the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages. So we knew where we wanted them to be in high school, but we knew in order for them to get there to pass the AP test and have not 1 seal of biliteracy, but 2 seals of biliteracy on their high school diplomas, 1 in Chinese and 1 in Spanish, that we would need to have a map for them. And so we created our vision and our plan. we were proud of the work we had done. We had reinvented Riverview. We had our enrollment going up. We had test scores going up. We were proud of what we were doing. And then I started to do my doctoral studies at San Diego State University with our wonderful educational leadership program, Dr. Uline. Woo! And it really expanded my thinking. And I thought, as I was studying transforming elementary schools into 21st century learning environments, I came across a video where I saw that in Trendsetter Video, that once upon a time, Smith Corona typewriters had merged with Acer computers, and they had an opportunity to evolve to become more of a different type of communication system. And after 1 year, they thought to themselves, this is kind of taking us off our path. We think we'll become the best typewriter company in the world. So they broke their partnership with Acer computers. Well, they became obsolete, right? They did not evolve with the times and the needs. And I thought to myself, wow, am I creating a typewriter? Or am I creating a unique device, like a device that's, ready for the 21st century? I thought, it's a really cool typewriter. It can type in English, it can type in Spanish, it can type in Chinese, but are we really transforming an education for our students? So we came back together as a staff and we thought back again to what my brother-in-law had told me. We did some visits, we went to Stanford, we went to Google, we looked around and we started studying. My professors helped enormously, and we took next steps. We continued to evolve, adding those 21st century skills: critical thinking, collaboration, communication, creativity, robotics, engineering. And then we looked at technology as an important fourth language, and we had smartboards in every classroom and one-to-one devices thanks to a bond in Lakeside. But we didn't stop there. We decided to really look at student agency and leadership, because that was an important part too. We knew that we needed our students to own this mission, that we, the teachers and the principal and the parents, couldn't own it for them. We couldn't want them and force them to learn 3 languages. They would have to want to do it themselves. They would have to embrace this mission and believe in it themselves. So we really looked at a leadership program and gave students the capacity and empowerment to really help run the school. And every student in 4th and 5th grade had a job. They had to apply for that job. And they truly helped run the school. If you call Riverview today, you would get a student probably answering the phone saying, student helper. And there were students doing the green team, doing the garden. If we have substitute teachers, there are a student tech team who takes them and helps them turn on the smartboard. There are ambassadors. If you were on a tour at Riverview on Friday, you saw our student ambassadors. And every student was really empowered to help run the school because it was their school. And it really helped. And then we gave the students a challenge, a prompt. We said, how can you help make Riverview or our community a better place? And then they were given the opportunity to do leadership projects, and they became little project managers, and they had their team, and they had to show me their plan. And then they presented in 3 languages their plans on our leadership day. And it's really, really great, the things that they had done. Has this been easy? No. To do this type of program, to really transform a public school into this kind of environment, it required really thinking out of the box. Even within the language community, we were thinking outside the box. And it's not always a comfortable place to be. It's challenging. I remember, and one thing you need to know about Lakeside, it's in a very small rural community, once upon a time known for, unfortunately, racism. And at first, we had graffiti on our Cesar Chavez playground, and we were encountering some pushback for being in this community and teaching different languages. I even had a cowboy come to the office, cowboy hats, boots, tell me, I hear you're not teaching English in this school. And I corrected him, said, we are teaching English, but we're also teaching Spanish and Chinese because we want our students to be well prepared to thrive in a global society. And what could be more American than wanting our students to have what they need to be successful? And so that helped. Well, a couple years later, we had Fox News show up, national Fox News, not local Fox News. And guess what? Because we worked with the Confucius Society at San Diego State University, we must be teaching communism because we're teaching Chinese. I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? So we welcomed them. We said, come on in. It was the morning show, and they were supposed to do like little segments throughout the day and come back. And they came into the classroom. We went into the Chinese classroom where a Taiwanese teacher happened to be teaching. And she was teaching the hungry caterpillar in Chinese. And of course, I said, it's just a hungry caterpillar. It's not a metaphor for American capitalism. It's simply the hungry caterpillar in Chinese. We are vetting our curriculum. We are looking and making sure there's nothing for you to worry about. This is bridging our cultures. This is breaking down those borders. This is helping our students have what they need to be successful. So they saw there wasn't a story there. After a couple stories, something hotter came along, and they took their little cameras and left. There are challenges. It is hard work. You have to be a little bit crazy. You really do. But you also have to have a lot of courage. You have to have a lot of heart. You have to believe that students can achieve at such a rigorous level from a very young age. And you have to make them believe that they can do it, that they have your full support, that if they fall down, you will help pick them up, and you want them to take those risks. And one of my happiest, my last day at Riverview, my students gave me that quote in a big picture of all the students, and they said, thank you for now, we're the crazy ones who are going to go out and change the world. But you also have to be smart. When you have so many balls in the air and you're trying to break down borders, you have to be ahead. You have to always be one step ahead. So we were always looking, what is the state requiring us to do? What is the district requiring us to do? What's coming ahead? We were working ahead, and we had a plan. I knew I couldn't do this by myself. I needed all my staff to help me. We had a very distributed leadership model. So we took all our goals, and we mapped out how we were going to assess them, how we would know when we were going to assess them, and then the team, the leadership team, that was going to check to see if we were on track, we stayed green. If we were off track, it went to yellow, and if we were way off track, it went to red, so that we wouldn't let one child fall through the cracks as we taught them 3 languages. And if the state or the district ever told us, what are you doing? What are you doing? We would say, here's what we're doing, here's our plan, and here is our data. And what happened? We grew. We are now taking 225 with a lottery and a wait list at every grade level. The blue is a phase out of the English-only program. The growth is the Spanish with Chinese as a 3rd language. The green is a Chinese with Spanish as a 3rd language. Pretty soon the school will be capped at 1,200. It's on 2 campuses now. We took over 2 elementary school campuses, kinder and 1st grade on one campus, 2nd through 5th on the other. Test scores. Highest broke records in the district. We never focused on it. We focused on giving kids the best possible education we could give them, the skills we knew they needed to be successful. And the byproduct was great test scores. And now with the new CASP scores, again, our students outscored our district by far, they outscored our county, and they outscored the state average. So I'm going to give you a little example. We were walking on Friday with a tour from here, so you'll see people with the badges in the back, and we just captured a little bit of a student speaking. So what he did, he created a presentation on his iPad using haiku, and he's showing his presentation in Spanish a little bit, And then his Chinese teacher asks some questions about how he did the presentation, and he responds in Chinese. And then his Spanish teacher asks him where he's going for Thanksgiving break, and he responds in Spanish. So if we could play the video.
¿Cuánto costó la campana de libertad? Un poco más de $54. ¿Cuándo estaba colgada la campana de libertad? Estaba colgada el 8 de junio de 1755. ¿Cuánto pesó la campana de libertad? 2,000 shekels.
OK，还有呢？谁可以告诉我？可以。
因为有很多游戏也很重要，因为我们可以去 Safari 拿很多的字，在西班牙文和中文。
都可以找很多的字。还有谁可以告诉我很多不一样的？
Fui a Hawaii con mi mamá, papá, abuelo, abuela y no mi abuela porque ella no le gusta los aviones y mi hermana y mi cosa favorito era cuando fuimos buceando en el agua y vimos tortugas.
Me encantaría.
Solo una tortuga que estaba comiendo plantas ahí abajo del agua y también fuimos a la playa como 3 veces en esa semana a jugar y nuestro cuarto era muy bonito.
Gracias.
Pues vamos a cambiar de inglés. That was me at the end saying, okay, you can go back to your English lesson now with the tech TOSA. Okay, oops. So another border that we needed to break was how we were going to work with our middle schools and high schools, especially our high school is a different district, to make sure that this pathway existed for the students, that it didn't end in 5th grade. So that they have opportunities with both our middle schools. They continue to study two classes immersed during the day and for their language of immersion, and their 3rd language they study in a 0 period. Then we worked with a high school, and they have a wonderful program including the leadership strand. And then our students, because of the Chinese component, can go to the flagship programs. And the only one in California is San Francisco State. So we're hopeful that we can get more universities doing flagship programs so that we can look at this as not a K-5, not a K-8, not a K-12, but a K-16 challenge to prepare our students for us to break down the borders between our institutions, having us work together to give our students what they need to help shape their language through what they're going to be, an engineer in Spanish or Chinese or a lawyer. So they have the language skills and then can study alongside their peers in other countries. And these are our partners, and this is something that we wish for every child. This child here is a child that has autism, and she is in trouble. She's sitting in my chair, and we're about to have a conversation, and she thought she'd be really cute and try to get out of trouble. So can you click on her for a moment? It was cute, but it didn't quite work. Every child, every single child with special needs, socioeconomically needy, diverse ethnicities, every child deserves an education like this. What are our next steps? We're going to continue to work with creating friendships and now to take our program into the global interaction level. And I'm happy to say that next month we have our first students going on a trip abroad. And that now our community in Lakeside embraces our school. And we are on the rodeo parade singing 3 languages and they love it. And it's been a great metamorphosis. And these are our students on the International Day of Peace. And those are kindergartners, first and second, third through fifth. And with our mission of servant leadership and creating tomorrow's global leaders, we hope that our students will one day help make the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olympia, for a wonderful presentation on dual language immersion in Chinese, Spanish, and English. We have time for one brief question for Olympia before we move on to the next set of presentations. We have two microphones, one on the left side of the room and one on the right side of the room. Don't be shy. So I have a very brief question, and so this is related to some of the work that we're doing in dual language immersion as well. I was wondering if you could briefly describe, what are some of the steps that you took to address some of the misconceptions that parents may have about dual language immersion learning? So for example, some of those misconceptions may be that if a student is learning, let's say, Spanish, that may hinder his or her development in learning, English or Chinese or vice versa.
I think the best approach that we've taken is to invite parents to see, as well as all stakeholders. There's nothing like seeing. And then showing them the data and showing them how we address these issues, how they can help their child when they don't speak the target language with their homework, that's our job. And their job is to speak with their child and work with their child in the target language. So just having them see it and meet with us and answer questions and be available and just support them through it, all the way through it.
So in terms of resources, because a school like that must require quite a bit of resources and different types of resources, how did you deal with the district in terms of getting what you needed? And how did you deal with the district in general?
So again, staying one step ahead always, having plan A, B, and C. What were we going to do if we had this funding? What if we didn't have this partnership? What if we had nothing? What would we do to keep going forward? And also, again, keeping with the district, just making sure we were one step ahead and we had our plan and we had our data and that we were advocating for what we needed and what our program needed, but we were prepared to do what we needed to do, and we had that plan and that data to support us. Thank you.
Ms. Olympia, thank you so much. I can deliver this in English, barely. I can deliver it in Spanish. I can't do Chinese, okay? So, thank you. I think these are the spaces that give me hope. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to move through my presentation, and we're going to do a little bit call and response. And so I'm going to take about 5-6 minutes, and then we got some colleagues in the audience that are partners in our development, in our teaching, in our learning, that will serve as witnesses to the work. So the title is up there, La Universidad de la Vida, Living, Working, and Learning Across Borders. And I want to be a little bit clear about this, that, what we're doing here is the work that my colleagues and I, Francisco, my brother, who will speak after me, and our students and our community partners, it's really been about using our community and ourselves as text. I think we heard a lot of this last night from Dr. Dardar. And how can we imagine what our educational systems could look like? Not as intellectual enterprises alone, but as processes for thinking, for learning, but also for construction of knowledge. So one of the things that we do, is this a clicker?
Yes, and the green moves forward.
So one of the things that we do is, first, we think that place and ecology is important. So we're going to take you visually to the space that really formed our own identity. And this is important because as we do research, it's extremely important to just be straight up front. You know, the work we do is because it helps us learn, it helps us grow, and it feeds our mind, our soul, and our community. And so we come to this place from the borderlands of South Texas. Our families, Francisco's family and I, were Mexican born, and our parents immigrated to this country in the last year, the last day of 1968, last day of the year. And so much of my work and our work is around the commitment that our parents raised us around, which was a commitment to family. And family, certainly in their minds and in their experiences, were about husband, mother, father, sister, brother, and so forth. But quickly they've came to teach us that family was so much more than that. And so our families have grown. They've grown geographically, they've grown ideologically, they've grown racially. And so we really convene communities and families of very diverse backgrounds. And so I say this, and this is important because border crossing is the topic of the day. But what I need to highlight is the moments of contact before we cross those borders. What within ourselves, within our ecology, or within our spirit pushes us to go to that space of contact, to go to that border space. A friend of mine calls this space a cultural front. It is where differences meet. And the differences could be racial, gender, ideology, language. And what happens in these points and these spaces are important because at the point of contact, I got a timer and the phone is talking to me. I'm committed to staying on time. So at these points of contact, so a tension is created. And this tension can be either points of aggression, or it can be points and opportunities for innovation, and points and opportunity for action. And so the border crossing can be one or the other. The issue is, how do we make meaning of this? And how do we develop, not just for ourselves, but for our communities and our families, the skill sets, the understanding, the context, the political will to be forward, honest, and forthcoming, but then to be able to come back with a cultural wittedness to say, okay, this is what I've learned, and this is the way that I need to reframe this situation. Because if we continue to do the same thing, we continue to get the same results, right? And we know that. So we put up our parents up there because our parents were really our first teachers. And the beauty of this was for us was that as they learned, we learned. And as we learned, they did too. Our father died on his 77th birthday, May 19th, 2013. He died, he didn't speak a word of English after living in this country for 45 years. He and my mother raised 4 boys, 4 bachelor's degrees, 3 master's degrees, and 2 PhDs. There's still hope in this place. There is still hope if we are courageous enough to meet and go to that cultural front and say, I think there's an opportunity here. But that takes courage, and our parents taught us that. So, we're academics, right? So we got to say, okay, so how does this work? Because, full disclosure here, everything we do, we write it back, and it feeds the academy. So for us, our work isn't about what's my research agenda and how do I use it on my community. For us, it's what needs to happen in my community to make it a better place. We do that work. My academic training allows me to feed the meter and put it back in a format that the academy understands. Now, again, full disclosure, that doesn't mean that I'm going to get promoted the first time I come up. Sometimes not even the second. And I keep hoping that maybe the third, right? These aren't safe spaces, folks. These are not safe spaces, but they're necessary spaces if we want to change the world we live in, the institutions we live in. And for me, I'm all right. But there's a lot of people coming behind me that need for me and my community to take these actions. And our parents taught us that. So our father really left us with a huge wealth of stories. So our father was a janitor later in life because he worked the fields most of his life. And what he has here is, at the end of every day, he'd go collect all the trash. Before going to the trash can, he'd go to the principal and ask, "Las maestras están tirando esto. The teachers are throwing this away. Can I take it home?" And sometimes they'd say yes, sometimes they'd say no. But so he would take it home, and he collected these flip chart papers, sharing tablets and so forth. And this became an invaluable piece because my father in the mid-'80s, after we were undergraduates at UT Austin, and we had conversations about, we're going to these classes and we never see ourselves in the books. We never see ourselves in the syllabus. But those stories you tell us, they're rich. Have you written any of them up? He says, no. Well, how about you do that? So on these flip chart papers, our father penned his autobiography. He's a very literate man. And so, of course, as rookie researchers, we keyed it in. He did the data analysis, and then he said, no, you need to correct this, right? So these are evidence. These are raw data sets that we have. And so these were experiences of learning for us at every turn. And the classroom was our family. We were in different places, right? So some of the riches that our parents provided for us that have given us, this tremendous insight into navigating our own lives with our kids, with our families, but also in the academy, was those moments of tension that require a certain level of reflection and action. There's a picture here that one of our brothers took. Back in 1992, late January, my father's oldest brother was really sick, and he knew that he was close to death. 300 miles north, his youngest son and his daughter-in-law were giving birth to the grandchild. And he had to make a decision. Do I stay with the past? Or do I go and serve the future? It wasn't easy. He picked up. He and my mother went up north. They were with their son to welcome their granddaughter. And so this picture my brother took when he got back and went to visit his brother. And these are really personal. These are really personal issues. And I share this because this is what our work is for us. It has to be personal. If it is an academic exercise, I don't want to do it. And when it becomes that, it's time for me to go. Because somebody else can do that really, really, easy and a lot better sometimes. So this is my father. Our father as a young man in Mexico. When in Mexico, everybody turns 18 and you serve. You do your civil service duty, right? And so for the longest time, this picture sat in our living room. And for the longest time, we thought Our father was a U.S. veteran of the war. And this is really interesting because images are really powerful. We didn't know any better as kids. He wasn't even a U.S. citizen. But the images, right? Later we become aware our father was really a soldier of life, a civil servant. And that's what he became. That's what he became to us. And guess what? That's what we think we are. That's our work. So there's the three older kids of us. There's 4 boys. And this picture was when we came across the border. And I see this picture and I take it really personal because I see these kids every single day. These kids that are in our schools are no different than those little boys who came to this country with a dream. They came to this country, and our parents left everything behind. But they understood that there was something better. And that's the drive. That's the drive that really pushes our own research agenda. It's a commitment, again, to ourselves, to our families, and to our communities. So some of the moments as we grew up that our father really, really cherished was later in life. One of our academic mentors, which I got to acknowledge, Jim Shurik is back there. He made the contact, and Jim Shurik, I was a graduate student, he told me one day, he said, you know, there's a really interesting professor that came into campus. His name is Henry Trueba. You should go meet him. Henry Trueba became this huge mentor for us. And he navigated higher education for us. And he gave name to the work we were doing in communities. And Francisco's going to talk a little bit more about that work. But what he did was, after retiring from UT Austin, he picked up his wife and he said, I'm moving to South Texas. I want to be doing this work. I'm going to retire. I'm not stopping. So he wrote his last book in South Texas, and on the back cover, he put my father's picture. They became these huge friends. And what happened, I'm convinced, is that Henry Trueba finally met the public intellectual that he had always been in search of. You know, Henry Trueba was a Jesuit priest. He became an academic, but he never left that identity. And so, you know, this is the work that we've been doing publicly. It's nothing new. I think our academic technical training happened in the classrooms, but really the soul, the spirit, and the drive happened in the home. And I think if we look at our work in much more of an alignment with that kind of energy, with that kind of spirit, I think our work will look different. I think our students will think differently. I know my students do. So I'm going to invite Rudy. Rudy Jameson has been doing some work because this work I ground locally, but really the body of work has gone nationally as we worked around the country. And so Rudy's going to provide some input or feedback from his own context and experience.
Thank you, Miguel, for the opportunity. My name is Rudy Jameson. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. I'm a doctoral student at the University of North Florida. And I had the pleasure of meeting the Guajardos through a mentor of mine, Dr. Chris Jansen, and had an opportunity to visit South Texas, Llano Grande. And I can remember a time where I'd spent some time with them before. We were in the process of getting to know each other. And at this particular point I had mustered up enough courage to ask them to become a part of my developmental network. So a lot of my research is around mentoring, social capital, developmental networks, your own personal board of directors, if you will. So I asked them to become a part of my developmental network. And that came with a flurry of questions, not an answer of yes. So I continued to pursue that relationship. And while down there, I start to begin to appreciate the work that they were doing. And I didn't understand. I mean, I come from a poor community. I grew up in the house that my mother grew up in, and I consider myself a proud black man. Well, we embarked on a writing exercise together. And in this writing exercise, it was a really rigorous process. And part of the iterations were, sending documentation in, having it reviewed, getting feedback. And I consider myself, someone who exhibits feedback and help-seeking behavior. Well, I submit a draft. We're scheduled to meet. We're on a conference call. And the feedback that I get is, Rudy, we know you. We spent time with you. You did not even acknowledge yourself, self-identify as a black man in your narrative. That was painful. It was painful for several reasons. One, it was painful because it was coming from somebody who's not black. You talk about crossing boundaries. But during that exchange, what I realized was it was coming from a place of love. They sat down and they were willing to empathically understand where I was coming from, what I was trying to convey in my narrative, and to help me get there. So that whole negotiation and navigation of the space in the academy, that was helpful for me. But the boundary crossing came in our appreciation for each other and willingness to help. So for me, this relationship is a true exemplification of boundary crossing. And I see boundary crossing as relationship, right? As authentic, empathic, developmental relationship. And without those three things, I don't think that boundary crossing can be successful.
Thank you, Rudy. Larry is a graduate student at East Carolina University, and he too has been part of this developmental network. And so he's just going to share a couple of words, and then we're moving.
Yeah, just real quick, boundary crossing for me, really, crossing boundaries, it's about myself crossing them and then also helping others to do that. And these gentlemen up here are really great examples. I'm a middle school assistant principal in rural eastern North Carolina. There's 400 kids in my school, yet this is the third time that I've been at Ucea. I know Rudy, he's a doctoral student at University of North Florida. Samuel and his family, who are doctoral students at Texas State. So it's been so great to build up my network. So just a couple quick examples. In my community, the churches are really important. So I make it a point of knowing all my students, which ones are singers and play instruments. And I ask them, and they tell me when they're performing at their churches. So I go to those predominantly African-American or Latino churches on those occasions. There's a great opportunity for me to cross that border and that boundary and connect with those families. And then also it's a responsibility for me to bring those students and people that I work with into more of an academic world and open up some opportunities for them. So we had a national convening last summer at East Carolina University. I know there's another one coming up this summer. So I brought 3 of my middle school students and one of my bus drivers, actually. We spent a day conversing with school leaders from around the country, as well as higher education professionals as well. So yeah, crossing borders, crossing boundaries, it's, it's become a part of my way of doing business.
Thank you, Larry.
My older brother has given me very little time to speak. I'm sorry to say, but this is the struggle of the little brother syndrome. I would like to share, and probably in abbreviated form, the story of the organization that has really fueled our work for the last 20 plus years. And so this is a story of the Llano Grande Center for Research and Development that my brother and I founded along with high school kids and people back home in South Texas. And so we founded this as a college prep program back in the 90s. But the college prep program that was very successful when we were placing a lot of kids in very fancy schools in the Northeast began to push us in ways that were very uncomfortable. We began to think that we were doing something that wasn't altogether good because we were exporting very bright young kids to places where we may never get them back. So we created the Llano Grande Center right about that time as a college prep program that would infuse place-based pedagogies into the work. And so the very first initiative that we did was an oral history project. And so we went into the community, and this is as part of the curriculum, we went into the community asking elders who we should interview. And so the elders were very generous with suggesting you should interview this person and that person and that sort of thing. And so we started. The very first oral history we did was with an elder named Isabel Gutierrez. And so whoever's working the computer over there, if you could just click the PowerPoint, the fellow over there, if you can just click. Thank you. All right, so the very first interview we did was with this 97-year-old man named Isabel Gutierrez. His mother gave him the name Isabel because if you're familiar with the Mexican calendar, a lot of days have patron saints. So he happened to have been born on the day of Santa Isabel. So we went to Don Isabel's house because he had been recommended as one of the founders of this tiny community named Ed Couch. So I got a school bus, filled it up with kids, and we went to Don Isabel's house. Let's go check out this founder of this community of Ed Couch. So as we go into his neighborhood in Ed Couch, we're pulling up, the bus is pulling up to Don Isabel's house, and it's a very modest, humble home, wood frame home. And as the students get out of the bus, Don Isabel emerges from his house with his walker. And it becomes very clear that there's something amiss here in terms of, he's the founder? Es un hombre pobre. He was a laborer his entire life. It becomes very clear. So as the students gather around Don Isabel and the students begin to interview Don Isabel for this oral history, about 10 minutes into the interview, this one kid, the interviewer, Orlando, a 15-year-old kid, poses a question. He asked Don Isabel, a man on the other side of town said that you were one of the founders of Ed Couch. And Don Isabel took this question as if there was some skepticism behind it. Don Isabel, all 5'2" of them, as you can see there, stood up in a very erect way and then asked the student, Joven, he said, it was all in Spanish. He asked him, have you ever had any water here in Ed Couch? And the student says, yes, Don Isabel, I've had water. And Don Isabel says, in 1926, I dug the ditches to lay down the water pipes for the city of Ed Couch. Yo, he said, soy fundador de Ed Couch. So that very moment, Don Isabel shook our world. He was a laborer who never went to school, who was declaring himself important in the community. He was one of the founders of the community. And so the students began to think very differently. I began to think very differently. The curriculum then began to change because now we wanted to. And we were very clear about how, you know what, people here actually think they're important. So how about if we do something about excavating those stories that really elevate the working people of this community? So one of the things that we did was that we transcribed Don Isabel's oral history and we published it. You can go to the next slide. We published it in this journal that we published out of the high school, the Llano Grande Journal. And so we did it in English and in Spanish, and we gave Don Isabel a bunch of copies. So then Don Isabel happened to be going to this place, this adult daycare center that he called El Blue Bonnet. It was the Blue Bonnet. And we gave Don Isabel about 15 copies of the journal, and so he gave it to his friends at the Blue Bonnet. Don Isabel calls the high school one day, and he says, I need more copies of the journal. So we made a box full of copies of the journal and raced to El Blue Bonnet because there were elders awaiting. So I had a team of high school kids that went around passing the journals to the elders. And about 10 minutes into this, the director of the daycare center taps me on the shoulder and he says to me, do you know that more than half of those elders who are reading that are illiterate? So this is the very Freudian notion of being able to read the world. The elders were riveted. They were interested. I use Don Isabel almost as metaphor. Don Isabel is real, but also as metaphor to the spirit of our work. The spirit of our work, we work in a almost exclusively Mexican-American community, where kids are raised, where families live in ways where they think that they're not that important, but we know they are. And so we need to create a curriculum, a teaching and learning process, where they see themselves in that. And so that is the push, the work of the Llano Grande Center. And I know I'm running out of time, and we had asked a couple of people in the audience to respond. And so Patricia and Yvette, if you would just respond in about a minute, so if you would, grab the microphone, please. And we asked these two young ladies because they actually happen to be from the border, and so they recognize these stories, I think, in very clear ways. Go ahead, Yvette.
Thank you, Francisco, for the invitation. And so coming from the Rio Grande Valley, I can relate to this border crossing story of growing up in the valley and things that we hear about the valley, about marginalized communities and all of these things that come from a deficit perspective. And yet I knew as a child that I had grown up in this very rich community. It might not have been rich in economics, but it was rich in wisdom. And as a Latina educator and Latina leader, I think that's, for me, that is border crossing. It is looking at the richness of other people and families and bringing that to life. And so I think that starts with an invitation into inviting people and valuing them and sharing them and making sure that our students and our families are valued in school. I'll pass it on to Patricia.
Thank you. I'm Patricia Rocha. I'm a doctoral candidate at Texas State University. I'm from Sebastian, Texas. Very small town with a blinking light. When my mom graduated from high school, she went and spoke to her high school counselor the day of graduation that night. They were going to have it out at the football stadium, and she said, I want to go to college. And her high school counselor told her, it's too late. Today you're walking, you're graduating. That's not an option for you. My mom then raised 5 of us, 2 siblings that graduated from law school. I'm pursuing my PhD. What I've learned from stories and what I'm learning to do is border cross is not only learning from the stories, but learning about the skills, the pedagogy of home. I had trouble in my dissertation process understanding narrative inquiry. And so in talking to my mom's skill as a quilter and bringing pieces together, I understood how I could get through writing a chapter 1, a chapter 2, a chapter 3, and a chapter 4. So it's not only that, it's that invitation. And when I started talking to her about how she was helping me make sense of the dissertation process, she now considers herself, like Don Isabel, a committee member. My chair is Dr. Guajardo. My mom is also an honorary committee member. She's always on me. What did Dr. Guajardo say? Have you texted him? Let me read that word. Have you written today? She's asking me about the process. So I think border crossing is also about the skills and pedagogy of home.
Thank you very much to my mentors, the Drs. Guajardo. Goatsi hapa, Dawash Dawashrap, Wahiname Lee Francis, Washesh, Kawekame, If Americaname, Mame Trayamatani, Ekae, Shkoyanima. So I give you my traditional intro. You heard a little bit of it last night. My name is Lee Francis. My family is from the Pueblo of Laguna, also from the Pueblo of America, half and half. And my mixed identity, as I bring this forward, to be able to talk about shifting identities and trickster politics. The framework for this is this idea of the trickster discourse as laid out by Gerald Visner, the Anishinaabe scholar, who talks about the trickster and the stories that we know from trickster as a place that disrupts the Western hegemony. A trickster is inserted into this space, and through its very presence, it does not allow that same line to exist. It disrupts that space. And so when we think about our identities and we think about the trickster in the space, we want to reach out to everybody, to be able to be that trickster, to allow those tricksters to flourish. And I will give you this poem as a close. This is a poem that I wrote that comes about me and where I come from. You call me mixed blood. It falls out of your mouth and onto the floor like a dirty word. I pick it up, hold it up to the light, dust it off, and respond. Yes, I am mixed blood. I am the tribally endowed ancient blood of ancient peoples, mixed and stirred and boiled over 100,000 years and left to simmer in this melting pot we call America, where my mother's Celtic warriors and my father's desert nomads found a common bond to tie them to one another in an arid landscape under a sapphire sky. Yes, I am mixed blood. My skin, too light to be anything else but Heinz 57, a collection of ingredients that make up my whole. My skin, too light, except when I hang my arm out the window as I drive 100 miles to and from the res every day to teach the children of my grandmother's people how to read, to write, too light, a muddled, mixed up mutt. Right, yes, I am mixed blood. And I dream mixed blood dreams, and I sing mixed blood songs, and I eat me some mixed blood food. All right, I confess, I love me some fried bread, and green chili stew, and tortillas and tamales, and fried chicken and mashed potatoes, and hummus and domas, and pita and goat cheese, and hamburgers and hot dogs, and laben and kusa and olives, and guacamole. My small intestine is a cultural cornucopia, and my belly is a tribute to my family. Yes, I am mixed blood. I cannot hide it. The white bubbles to my skin like a froth on top that betrays my eclectic ethnic background. Scots and German, Greek and English, Laguna and Lebanese. I am one half here to greet the pilgrims, the other half getting off the boat, discovering the American dream. I am mixed blood. Raised Pueblo by the son of an immigrant. I am pale on the outside, but stained glass in here. The colors radiate from my fingers so bright I turn clear, and you see through me. See, not the color of my skin, but the color of my blood and bones woven together with shades and tones of time-worn thread, white and red, black and green. I scream for you to see I am mixed blood because somewhere in my line there was love. Somewhere back there, a Lebanese man looked at a Laguna woman and said, "Damn, baby, you're fine. Let's love together for all our lives and have babies that are smart and kind and honest and good and know who they are and how they came to be when we mixed our hearts, our lives, our blood." Yes, I am mixed blood. Cut me and I will bleed mixed blood, and I will pour over the land and seed the earth with wildflowers and cross-pollination, and you will drown beneath joy and tenderness, purity and righteousness, tolerance and justice and love. You see, my blood is pure 100% mixed blood, pure, purified in the melting pot of love, on love. My blood is the love of ancient ones who got together to create something better and now. You try to contaminate my blood with your impurities of hate and isolation, intolerance and segregation because my skin ain't that brown and my hair ain't that long. You call me mixed blood like it's a dirty word. It falls out of your mouth onto the ground. I pick it up, dust it off, shine it to the lights, and say, yes, I am mixed blood. Thank you for reminding me why. So I entreat all of you that in the work that I have done, putting together my dissertation, I was able to move a poem into there. As a performance poet, this is the type of scholarship and research that I do. But I think more importantly is that you have mentors, that you have people in these spaces that allow for that trickster discourse to thrive, to be the tricksters yourselves, to be able to do that for your students and your communities, that you disrupt that space, that you allow these types of opportunities to thrive, to be different than what we normally do, and to be that trickster wherever you occupy in any of those spaces. Thank you very much.
Thank thank you very much to all of our presenters and our participants in this evening's session. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but the presenters will be here should you would like to connect with them. Thank you once again.